Welcome back to the Resolution Room, the place where conflict becomes clarity, leadership becomes personal, and growth starts from within. I'm your host, Robert Holmes, and today we need to talk about the coworker who never takes a lunch break, answers questions in seconds, confidently acts like it knows everything, and occasionally makes something up while looking you directly in the face. No, I'm not talking about somebody in your accounting department. I'm talking about artificial intelligence. AI is already inside of our workplaces. It's helping people write emails, summarize meetings, build presentations, create job descriptions, analyze spreadsheets, prepare interview questions, and draft performance evaluations. And whether your organization has formally approved it or not, there's a good chance somebody is already using it. That means the question is no longer, should HR use AI? The real question is, how do we use AI without losing our judgment, compromising confidential information, creating discrimination, or removing the human element from human resources? That question becomes even more important when you work in healthcare, behavioral health, mental health, or any substance use treatment facility. In our environments, we are not simply managing attendance records and job descriptions. We are working around patient information, employee medical documentation, accommodation requests, clinical credentials, safety concerns, trauma, burnout, licensing requirements, staffing shortages, and some of the most sensitive information a person can share. So today, I want to talk about what responsible AI adoption in HR can look like, not from the perspective of a software salesman, not from the perspective of somebody promising that AI will solve every workforce problem. I want to talk about it from the perspective of an HR professional who still believes that relationships matter, context matters, accountability matters, and people deserve to understand how decisions affecting their lives are being made. Here's the first thing I want every HR leader to understand. AI should help us prepare for decisions. It should not make the decisions for us. AI can help organize information. It can help identify questions. It can help us improve our writing. It can help us notice patterns, but it should not determine who gets hired, who gets fired, who receives an accommodation, who is considered a high performer, or who isn't. AI can support human judgment. It cannot replace human responsibility, because the moment something goes wrong, you cannot walk into a courtroom, an unemployment hearing, an EEOC investigation, or an employee grievance and say, well, the computer told us to do it. You can outsource a task. You cannot outsource accountability. Let me give you an example. Imagine that a supervisor contacts HR because an employee has not completed required documentation. The supervisor provides a list of dates, several missed deadlines, coaching conversations, and the operational impact. The HR professional enters that information into an AI tool and asks it to draft a written warning. The tool produces a polished document in approximately 10 seconds. That sounds efficient. But when HR reviews the draft, the memo says the employee demonstrated gross negligence, willful insubordination, and a complete disregard for patient welfare. None of those conclusions were supported by the facts. The employee was behind on documentation. That is a legitimate performance concern. But the AI tool escalated the language because it was trying to sound authoritative. Had HR copied, pasted, and issued that document without reviewing it, the organization could have turned a correctable performance issue into a much larger employee relations problem. That is one of the most dangerous things about AI. It does not always sound confused when it's wrong. Sometimes it sounds more confident when it's wrong. The United States Department of Labor's 2026 AI literacy framework specifically identifies hallucinations and accuracy limitations as core concepts workers need to understand. The framework also emphasizes that human design and oversight remain essential because every AI system reflects human decisions about data, goals, and parameters. In plain language, that means the tool can produce an answer that sounds professional, organized, and completely incorrect. That is why HR cannot become a copy and paste department. We have to remain a review, analysis, and judgment department. In my experience, AI is most helpful when the HR professional already understands the subject. When I understand corrective action, I can look at an AI-generated memo and recognize that the tone is too aggressive, the expectations are unclear, or the conclusions are unsupported. When I understand the accommodation process, I can recognize when the AI gives me a rigid answer that ignores the need for an interactive dialogue. When I understand investigations, I know that a summary is not the same thing as a credibility determination. The danger comes when someone uses AI to replace knowledge they have never developed. AI can make an experienced professional faster. It can also make an inexperienced professional confidently wrong. That distinction matters. The goal should not be to use AI so we can stop thinking. The goal should be to use AI so we have more time to think. We should automate the paperwork, not the humanity. We should use technology to create more room for conversations, coaching, leadership development, conflict resolution, and thoughtful decision making. If AI saves me 30 minutes drafting a routine communication, that is 30 minutes I can spend preparing a supervisor for a difficult conversation. That is 30 minutes I can spend listening to an employee. That is 30 minutes I can spend looking beyond the presenting complaint and trying to understand what is actually happening inside the team. The time we save through AI should be reinvested into people. Otherwise, we are not improving human resources. We are simply producing more paperwork at a faster speed. For healthcare and behavioral health organizations, I believe AI use generally falls into 3 lanes. The first lane is the green lane. These are lower risk administrative activities. AI can help brainstorm an orientation agenda. It can turn rough notes into a professional meeting outline. It can help improve the readability of a job posting. It can generate examples for supervisor training. It can help create a first draft of an employee frequently asked questions document. It can take a complicated policy concept and suggest ways to explain it in plain language. It can help HR prepare questions before a meeting. The key is that we are not giving the tool confidential information, and a qualified person is reviewing the final product. For example, I might ask an approved AI tool to create 10 examples of strong and weak SMART goals for behavioral health supervisors. That could save time and give me a starting point, but I would still need to review those examples to make sure they reflect the actual responsibilities of our supervisors, our productivity expectations, our clinical environment, and our overall organizational culture. That is a reasonable use of AI. The second lane is the yellow lane. These are activities where AI may be helpful, but the risks are significantly higher. This includes drafting corrective actions, analyzing employee survey comments, developing interview questions, reviewing job qualifications, summarizing investigation notes, evaluating compensation information, and assisting with performance reviews. These activities require stronger controls. The information may need to be de-identified. The tool must be approved by the organization, and the output needs meaningful human review. AI should not make the final recommendation for any of these subjects. For example, AI may help an investigator organize 20 pages of notes into a single timeline, but AI should not decide which witness is credible. It was not in the room. It cannot evaluate hesitation, consistency, motive, organizational history, the power dynamics, or whether someone simply misunderstood a question. It can organize the evidence, though. A human being must evaluate the evidence. Then we have the red lane. These are areas where HR should move with extreme caution or avoid using general AI tools entirely. Do not enter patient information into an unapproved public AI system. Do not enter substance use treatment records. Do not upload an employee's medical certification. Do not copy an entire workplace investigation containing names, allegations, diagnoses, and witness statements into a consumer chatbot. Don't allow an algorithm to independently reject applicants. Select employees for termination, decide whether an accommodation is reasonable, or determine whether someone is telling the truth. And please do not use AI as an employee surveillance machine, simply because the technology makes it possible. Not everything we can measure should be measured. Not everything we can track should be tracked. And not every piece of data represents performance. Sometimes it represents context that the system simply cannot see. Healthcare HR also needs to understand an important privacy distinction. I often hear people say, we cannot discuss that because of HIPAA, whenever an employee has a medical issue. But HIPAA does not automatically cover every piece of medical information inside of an organization. HHS explains that employment records held by an organization in its role as an employer are generally not protected by the HIPAA privacy rule, even when those records contain health-related information. However, the ADA requires employers to treat employee medical information as confidential and maintain it separately from regular personnel records. Patient records remain protected, including when the patient also happens to be an employee. That distinction matters when developing an AI policy. Saying do not enter HIPAA information is not enough. Your policy should address patient information, employee medical information, accommodation records, leave documentation as it relates to leave, investigation materials, payroll information, Social security numbers, credentialing documents, background checks, and any other piece of confidential organizational data. Even when something is not technically protected by HIPAA, it may still be protected by another law, an ethical duty or an obligation, or just basic professional judgment. And in substance use treatment, organizations must also account for the heightened confidentiality requirements associated with all types of compliance laws. This is why healthcare organizations cannot simply download a generic AI policy from the internet and put their name on it. Your policy must reflect your environment. A retail company and a behavioral health provider do not carry the same information risks. In healthcare, confidentiality is not only a compliance requirement. It's part of the trust that allows people to seek help. When someone enters treatment, requests an accommodation, reports harassment, or discloses a mental health concern, they are trusting the organization to handle that information carefully. The introduction of AI does not reduce that responsibility, it increases it. Another major concern is discrimination. AI tools are sometimes marketed as being more objective than people. But AI systems learn from data created by people, created by organizations, and created by historical systems. If the historical data contains bias, the technology may reproduce that bias at scale. The EEOC has warned that the use of software, algorithms, and AI in employment decisions may violate federal discrimination laws. The agency has specifically addressed the risk that hiring technologies may disadvantage people with disabilities, including when video interview software analyzes speech patterns or when assessment tools fail to provide reasonable accommodations. Imagine a behavioral health organization using an automated interview platform that evaluates eye contact, facial movement, vocal tone, response speed, and word choice. The organization may believe it is measuring confidence or communication ability, but what happens to an applicant with autism? What happens to someone with a speech impairment? What happens to an applicant whose first language is not English? What happens to someone simply experiencing anxiety? What happens when the tool interprets a disability as a lack of engagement? The employer remains responsible for the employment decision, even when a vendor created technology. A contract with a vendor does not transfer your legal or ethical obligations. Before using an automated employment tool, HR should be asking questions. What information is being evaluated? How was the system tested? Can applicants request an accommodation? Has the system been evaluated for adverse impact? Can a human override the recommendation? Are applicants or employees told that AI is being used? How long is the data retained? Who can access it? What happens when the tool is wrong? If the vendor cannot clearly answer those questions, that is your answer. So, how should an organization begin bringing AI into HR? Start with inventory. Before creating a policy, find out what people are already doing. Recruiting may be using AI inside the applicant tracking system. Managers may be using public chatbots to write evaluations. The communications team may be using AI to create employee messages. Finance may be using automated forecasting. Clinical leaders may be using transcription or documentation tools. Employees may be using AI to complete mandatory training assignments. You cannot manage what you have not identified. Next, establish approved tools. Employees should know which systems may be used, what information can be entered, and which activities are prohibited. Tell employees to use AI responsibly is not a policy. This is an aspiration. A useful policy gives practical examples. It explains that brainstorming a generic staff appreciation message may be acceptable. Entering an employee's accommodation paperwork is not. Creating interview questions may be acceptable. Allowing AI to independently score and reject applicants is not. Summarizing de-identified survey themes may be acceptable. Uploading a spreadsheet containing employees' names, salaries, medical leave information, and disciplinary history is not. People need examples because employees will interpret broad language differently. Then, establish meaningful human review. And I want to emphasize the word meaningful. Human review does not mean clicking approve without reading the output. It means the reviewer has enough knowledge, authority, and time to identify problems. The National Institute of Standards and Technology organizes AI risk management around 4 major functions: govern, map, measure, and manage. That means establishing accountability, understanding the context of the AI use, evaluating its performance and risk, and responding to what the organization discovers. In HR language, that means we should know who owns the process, what decision the technology is influencing, what could go wrong, how we will test it, and who has the authority to stop using it. It also means conducting periodic audits. A tool that worked well last year may operate differently after an update. A process that produced no obvious problems during a small pilot may create adverse impact when used across hundreds of applicants. AI governance is not something you complete once and file away. It is an ongoing responsibility. Training is also critical. Do not train employees only how to write a prompt. Teach them how to challenge the answer. Teach them to check the facts. Teach them to remove confidential information. Teach them that AI may invent policies, court decisions, quotations, employee data are sources. Teach them not to confuse polished writing with correct analysis. And most importantly, teach supervisors that AI cannot replace a conversation. Here's another example. A manager is frustrated with an employee and asks AI to write an email addressing the employee's attitude. The AI creates a long message using phrases like hostile demeanor, negative energy, and failure to demonstrate organizational values. The manager sends it. Now, the employee has no idea what behavior needs to change. What did the employee say? When did it happen? What was the impact? What should the employee do differently? AI gave the manager language. It did not give the manager clarity. A better use would be to ask the tool to help turn subjective concerns into questions the manager can consider. What specific behavior did I observe? What expectation was communicated? Did I address the issue when it occurred? Could there be a simple misunderstanding? Is the expectation applied consistently? What support does the employee need? Now, AI is helping the manager think. It is not helping the manager avoid thinking. That is a much healthier use. AI can help you draft the invitation to a difficult conversation. It cannot have the conversation for you. It cannot build trust for you. It cannot repair the relationship for you. And it cannot take responsibility for how you made someone feel during one of the most vulnerable moments of their career. Leadership still requires presence. I am not afraid of AI replacing human resources. I am more concerned about human resources using AI to avoid being human. When an employee raises a concern, we cannot send an automated response and consider the matter resolved. When someone requests an accommodation, we cannot feed the documentation into a system and allow it to calculate whether the person deserves support. When a leader is struggling, we cannot generate a coaching memo and pretend that coaching actually occurred. Documentation matters. Efficiency matters. Consistency matters. But none of those things can replace curiosity, courage, empathy, and judgment. They also will not be the departments that use AI for everything. The strongest departments will know where technology adds value, where it introduces risk, and where a human being must remain fully present. So here is a challenge I want to leave with HR leaders. Look at one repetitive administrative process that is consuming your team's time. Maybe it's formatting job descriptions. Maybe it's creating training examples. Maybe it is developing meeting agendas. Maybe it's turning rough notes into a first draft. Find a responsible way to use an approved AI tool to make that process more efficient. Then take the time you save and invest that into something human. Coach a supervisor. Call an employee instead of sending another email. Review a process that people have complained about for years. Spend time with a department you rarely visit. Ask your team what is making their work harder. Use AI to create capacity, then use that capacity to lead. Artificial intelligence will continue to change the workplace. There will be new tools, new regulations, new risk, and new opportunities. We do not need to respond with panic, but we also should not respond with blind excitement. We need thoughtful adoption. We need clear guardrails. We need transparency. We need training. We need ongoing review. And above all, we need human accountability. Because HR may use artificial intelligence, but our credibility will always depend on authentic intelligence, our ability to listen, our willingness to ask difficult questions, our judgment when the facts are incomplete, our courage to challenge leaders, our compassion when people are struggling, and our commitment to make decisions that are not only efficient, but fair. Use AI to make HR faster. Use AI to make HR clearer. Use AI to make HR more consistent, but never use AI as an excuse to make HR less human. Automate the paperwork. Do not automate the humanity. Thank you for joining me for another episode of The Resolution Room. I'm Robert Holmes, and remember, resolution does not begin when everybody agrees. Resolution begins when we are willing to enter the room, confront what is changing, and lead with clarity, compassion, and accountability. I will see you next time in the resolution room.